This video is for entertainment purposes only. None of the information you're about to hear should be considered medical advice, and you should always consult a licensed medical practitioner before embarking on a health or lifestyle change. Okay, so we're recording this week with Hope from Mission Keto. Again, I'd like to say I appreciate you coming on here and speaking with us this week, and hopefully we can.
Thank you so much for asking me. Who doesn't love talking about themselves, right?
Well, yeah, it's funny. I've done almost 20 of these interviews now myself, and it's weird when I get on the other side of it.
Yeah,
it is different, you know. But trying to talk about yourself is definitely a little more difficult. But you know, as with most of the interviews here, I'm just trying to bring as much information to YouTube as possible. You know, I don't have the biggest following on YouTube yet, but you know, it's the more information I feel that we can bring out, the better it is, and hopefully we can help someone with the information that we come up with in these interviews. So
absolutely, yeah. Even if you're helping just one person, you know, and I'm sure you are. That's awesome.
Yeah, it in our last week, I did a best of video, and there was actually someone in the chat that seemed ready to start changing the way they were living. So
that is so cool.
Yeah, so that's all we can really hope for. So
right.
So usually the way I like to do these interviews is basically, if we want to start with sort of what you got into the keto space, and you know how long you've been doing it and all that stuff, and then we can get into how things are going now and where things are going.
Okay. Well, in a nutshell of just how I started and how long ago, it was 2017. But I'm not that perfect person that has kept up with it for that long. 2017, our oldest daughter called us and she said, "Hey, I'm going to be trying this new thing, the keto diet." Her and her husband were. And so after kind of looking it up and seeing, and I'm like, cheese, okay, bacon, yeah, you know, all this stuff that we eat anyways, we just have to kind of cut out like high carb items. I was like, we can try this. So that's what kind of started it. And we were very successful. My husband is doing it with me, or he's on his own journey right now too. But we started that together in 2017. I lost all the weight that I wanted. I was exactly where I wanted to be. And then life happened. You know, we moved to Georgia for my job. Right, like 2 months later, the pandemic happened, and you know, it slowly started creeping back up because that new thing, net carbs, came out, and which does work for some people. I will never knock it if it's working for you, but that definitely did not work for us. So the pounds just kept creeping back up. So that's basically how it started. So we'll end it with that.
Yeah, the whole net carbs thing, and well, my personal experience with it is, and you're right, I think it works for a lot of people. And a lot of people do see results, you know, when they start just by cutting out all the crap and, you know, trying to stay at a net carb limit for the most part. But I found the same thing happened to me as I stopped focusing on total carbs and allowed the treats and all that crap to sort of work their way back into my diet. And then, for I think the third year that I was on keto, things were going backwards. And then, you know, starting the fourth year, I just said, no, I'm just I'm more carnivore now than anything else. But so, yeah, I can definitely understand that and definitely relate to it. It's and I think that's probably something a lot of people wind up happening. It happens to their journey. It's you know, you get comfortable with things, and so cool. So the So basically, is your daughter still doing keto? Is she still?
Well, yeah, she's kind of been back and forth on it too, but she is actually doing it now. And because it has been the only thing that has worked. And at this point, it's, for me, it's a lifestyle now. That's what I'm going to be doing. Last January of 2022. Yeah, this is 23. So January of 2022, I was like, that's it. I'm going back to basics. I'm, because when we first started it, there was no packaged foods, none of that. We were eating the hamburgers and, salads and the egg roll in a bowl, all that stuff that was so popular and still is. And, I would make literally like cheese chips in the oven for both of us for the week to snack on, pepperoni chips, that kind of thing. And there was no packaged foods at all. So that's what I have been doing, back to basics. I am not a huge meat lover. I love like salmon, and I will have a hamburger, and I can have like roasts and stuff, but for the most part, I mean, I love salads and stuff too. So I do like the veggie part of it. And definitely the cheese thing too. And bacon. I mean, thank goodness I love bacon. But I started last January and I said, I'm going to give myself a year because I didn't want to put pressure on me because things can happen. Because I've been through it before, and I did. All the weight that I had regained, I lost almost all of it back, but like 5 pounds. And I've been working out and stuff too. So I feel like I was very successful because working out can kind of, alter your weight loss portion of it. You know what I mean? So I did. I lost 34 pounds last year. And, I gave room to myself for our anniversary, maybe had some seafood tacos, you know what I mean, at a restaurant or something like that. I just didn't put a lot of pressure because I know that doing it this way, counting the total carbs, it works. And it did.
Yeah. Yeah. I think once you get to that point where, you forget, or you stop calling it a diet sort of thing, and you turn it into a lifestyle, that allows you that, I don't know how to say it, allows you to
I know what you're saying. It's like,
you
it's not
say,
freedom, but I don't feel like I'm limiting myself. I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything either. I just, because we all are human. And that's one thing I do love about my channel is there is a no judgment zone. We're human. This life is hard, and get right back up tomorrow. You know what I mean? So, and everybody's on a different journey too. Like you said, you're doing partly carnivore. My husband is doing strictly meat right now, meat and salt. And then he has an occasional coffee, and he's almost at 100 pounds lost since last July. So I couldn't do that. I don't want to do it, So it's just whatever works for you, I think, is what's important.
Yeah, absolutely. Like there is, you're 100% right. There's no right way to do it. It's whatever sort of allows you to stay consistent with things, I think, is the way to do it. The way I do keto or carnivore is going to be different from the next person. And, and that's why I, even on my channel too, it's like there's such a spectrum of people that do things differently. And that's, again, why I want to do interviews like this, so that it shows people that, hopefully somewhere in there's someone they can relate to, right?
Right.
Like,
exactly.
There's been lots of people I've talked to that are strictly carnivore, and then there's people that are ketovore or keto, or just low carb and stuff like that. So I do think it's important to find that balance for yourself, so that, because if you're right, if you don't like what you're doing, it's never going to work long term.
Right. Exactly. And I feel like it's very important too. Like I know there's a few people, I know Alan from Alan's Awesome Keto World too. He's in maintenance mode. And that's kind of where I'm at. I'm still trying to just play around with a few more pounds just for fun. But I think that's important to document that too, because people are going to get there. And I've had people ask me, are you going to stop your channel once you get to your goal weight? No, I want to hopefully help and show what I'm doing to kind of maintain it. So yeah.
Sure. Yeah. And I personally, like, I didn't even start my YouTube channel until I had more or less lost all the weight that I have lost. And, like
Man, if
but that's when I figured at that time, it's like, okay, well, I can't document my journey with YouTube, but
yeah,
maybe I can help with bringing what I've learned over the last
you
couple of
have
years.
before
Cause
pictures. All you got to do is pop up at a before picture too while you're
yeah,
talking about it, you know?
yeah. And I
Yeah.
think you're right. Everyone talks about the journey and getting to that goal weight and everything else. I personally think it's harder when you get there.
Mm,
Like you see
well,
that number on the scale if if you use a scale or not, and you're like,
right.
okay, well, what now, right? So the whole maintenance mode type thing is, I find, it's just as hard as changing your lifestyle, I think, as trying to maintain it.
Right. Yep.
So,
It's true. It's true.
yeah.
Yikes. But good job with
Um,
you. You're in that maintenance mode now too?
yeah, pretty much. Yeah. With me, it got to the point where, I lost 80 pounds basically on the
Wow.
nose, got under 200 pounds, and uh, for the first time since I was like 18 years old, kind of thing. And,
Oh,
I was proud of what I did. It worked really good, but it wasn't really uh, what my body wanted. I don't think,
mm,
like, I got there, and now I basically just listen to my body. And if it tells me I'm feeling good, okay, well, I don't sit under 200 pounds anymore. It's more 210,
okay.
215, something like that.
Yeah.
But this is where I feel my best, right? And I think that's the hard part, is that everyone has that goal in their head when they start. Okay, well, I want to get down to this weight and everything
Yeah.
else. But, especially as we get older, I think our bodies have a different idea of what that goal weight should
Yeah.
be.
That's definitely true. And you're absolutely right about that number in your head. I talked about that a lot last year, as I wanted to hit this 145 because that was the weight. After I had my kids, I never lost that last 10 pounds, so I was 145, and I'm like, if I can at least get back to that. But you're right, age plays a really big part in it. I worked out too, and I have this fun goal. Like, my husband Andy has this goal to get back to his weight that we got married at. And so I was like, well, that's fun. Maybe I'll try that too, just for fun. But I am happy. I'm happy where I'm at. If I don't lose another pound, and I think that's important too. It's like, I don't care if I say I'm 150 right now. That may sound large, and my Fit Track scale says I'm still overweight, but I'm happy and I feel good, and my blood work is good. My blood pressure is better. So, that's what I'm looking at, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's important for people to understand too, because trying to maintain, you know, a body weight that's not,
Yeah, it's
and home, like, that your body doesn't want you to maintain.
yeah.
That's a lot of work. Like, that's a lot of stress. And, I don't know. I just, again, if I got really strict with it and I worked out a lot more and all that, I could probably get back down under 200 pounds. But I don't know. I
Yeah,
feel good enough now. It's like, wow, I'm not going to stress
that's what
myself out about that. So,
absolutely. Yeah, that's what
yeah.
matters. So,
Yeah. Um, so do you, I always like to ask, do you do any fasting, or
no.
is
No,
that
not
kind
really.
of a no?
No, I mean, I don't technically eat a meal until lunchtime, but I am a very big coffee lover. So, I do have my coffee, one or two in the morning.
Mhm.
And right now I'm doing a dairy-free challenge the month of April, so I'm not having my half and half, but I'm still doing like coconut cream or almond milk. So, if it's got what calories or fat they say it's got, it'll break your fast, but I don't track. I don't, that's just too much thinking for me, and
Mhm.
I never did it before, so no. But I don't technically eat a meal till lunchtime.
Mhm.
So I don't know. I guess I don't, but I feel like I kind of do naturally. I've always been brought up, my mom always said, eat when you're hungry, and now
Mhm.
it's eat till you're full too. So if I'm hungry, I'm going to eat.
Okay, so we're recording. Today we're with Heath and Shelley from Hungry Heath. It's great to have you guys here. Um, I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while. Like once I restarted this series of the interviews, yours was one of the channels I wanted to get up here. It's just trying to get things going again and get things on a consistent basis. And it's good we could finally get this going.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
For sure. Thank you.
Yeah. Like we've been, I don't know, I'm sure we probably met through Two Crazy Ketos.
Yes, sir.
As did a lot of us. And then you guys started. Did you have your channel before they did, or did you start after 2KK?
We actually found them when we went keto.
Yeah. In fact, I think you had your channel before us, because I kind of remember them mentioning you, and that you did interviews. And then we kind of, because we love cooking, so we kind of put out like a couple recipe videos. In fact, the chaffle fries was our first one, but we just weren't really consistent. And then when he got his MS, that's when we really started like
diving into
it and getting consistent.
Sure, makes sense. But yeah, like I was saying, we've been in the same sort of community of keto folks for a few years now. Like I know most of the people that are on your live stream every Friday night are the same people I've seen out supporting other creators for quite some time. So it's good to see that community that sort of follows everyone around. So why don't we, usually with these interviews, where I like to start is sort of what brought you to keto, and then we can sort of dive into how things are going now.
Okay.
Well, I like to tell folks the only reason why I'm keto is because she made me. That's why I call her the warden. It was a little over 4 years ago. We were on a cruise. Her stepfather gifted a world cruise on Princess. It was amazing. We were how many days in on it?
We were only 37 days on the cruise. I know it sounds weird, when there's the upcoming cruise of 7 days, people are still like, wow, that's long. But we were 37 days, only a third of the way through the cruise of a 111-day cruise. And
she got sick and had to get life flighted out. They were back and forth between life flight or the Coast Guard coming and getting her off. And then she was in the hospital in New Zealand for how many days was it?
A total of 10 days.
Yeah.
And then so what I ended up is I got a flesh-eating bacteria. And by the time I went down to the infirmary, they were like, I have to get you off the ship now. You only have hours left. Or, if we could not wait to the next port, which was the next day, I think. And they were like, because you won't make it. So they got me off. I had emergency surgery. And I knew I was a diabetic, and I was just kind of like, who cares? I'm not going to inject myself with insulin. I just don't like needles, like at all. And so I knew I was a diabetic, but we were just kind of YOLO. And it was really a doctor in the hospital that came to me, and he was like, okay, your A1C is like 13.6. Of course, he told me and they're in the US, we're on the metric, right?
Yeah.
So whatever the other way that they calculate things. And he was like, your A1C is like 13.6. So that's really why you got this flesh-eating bacteria, because your body is too busy fighting itself than to fight anything else that comes in. You almost died. And I was like, oh gosh. And then that's when he like straight looked at me, this young doctor, and he was just like, so what are you going to do about it?
What are you going to do about it?
Yeah. And he put it, and I'm so used to, I've had doctors my whole life that are like, look, this is what you do, giving you a prescription. You need to do this, this, and this. And it was just kind of like, or maybe I just don't like being ordered.
For sure.
So I just was like, oh, whatever. That doctors do that all the time. Here, this is what you got to do. But the way that doctor phrased it, it was like, oh, yeah, I'm the one responsible. So he wasn't telling me, well, this is what you need to do. He was like, so what are you going to do about it? And that's like, it just clicked with me. And I was like, oh, that's right. I have to do something. And then I'd kind of heard of keto, and we kind of experimented before. Like we had a friend who was doing keto meals, and we got her keto meals, but we just weren't impressed. Like, people loved her food, and she's a great chef. She's actually a chef, but we didn't find it filling, which, a lot of people, when you go keto, it's like, wow, it's so filling, but it wasn't. We were like having to add food to it, and we were only doing it for one meal, which I know is totally not what you're supposed to do. So I kind of heard about it. So when the doctor told me that, I immediately started researching, okay, how do I reverse my diabetes? There's got to be a way to reverse this, right? I don't want to be sticking myself with needles or anything. And that doctor never brought that up either. He was just like, what are you going to do? And I was like, okay, I know I need to cut out sugars. And he's like, oh, that's great. Like, he got so excited. So the first person that came up when I researched was Dr. Berry, talking about diabetes and how you can reverse it. And so immediately I just dove into Dr. Berry, watching everything, and was like, okay, I'm going to officially go full keto. And in this interim, he hadn't even got to the hospital yet because he had to wait till he get off the ship. So then when he finally got to the hospital 3 days later, I was like, look, I'm changing things up, but you're going to have to do this with me because I just can't do it alone. So the only way this is going to be successful and we're going to last is you have to do it with me. And which I knew I had him at that point because I almost died. So I knew he was going to say yes to anything. And so I was like, look, we're going to go keto. And he was just like, what? Give up my Dr. Peppers? Give up pizza?
I've always said my favorite foods have always been burgers, pizza, and tacos, which is bread. With the anti-keto, basically. So it took me a while to wrap my head around it.
Yeah, and I was like, look, when we're together, when we're having meals at home, when we go out to eat together, any of that, you're going to have to do it because that's the only way I can do this. And he was like, okay. Well, by day 8 in the hospital, they were no longer having to give me insulin. Just by doing just basic keto first steps, by day 8, they were like, oh, your blood sugar is actually normal. We don't have to give you insulin. And that's when it really kind of reinforced, okay, there's something going right with this. We got to continue it because if it's already having that fast of an impact, then that means this is worthwhile. And then we're keto. That was February of 2019. And we were doing really well with it. And then about a year and a half later is then how he really got into it.
For a long time, I was getting this weird feeling around my abdomen. It felt like a band was around me, like somebody was tightening a rope or something around me. And every time I would Google it, it kept calling it the MS band.
Or hug.
The MS hug. And I didn't have MS back then. I wasn't diagnosed. So I was like, blew it off. But then I worked construction back then. And I was walking into the house, into a brand new home. Because what I did was cabinets and quality control on them. And I had to check off on my jobs on a little tablet, a little iPad. And I was looking down at the iPad as I'm walking into the house, and I didn't see there was a step ledge from going into the front door, and I tripped over it and hit my head. And for the next couple of days, I had really, really bad vision problems. So I went to an eye doctor. She checked me out and told me everything's fine with my eyes. There's just something wrong with my head. I was like, great. That's what my wife tells me too. There's something in my head. And they finally sent me to a specialist and they did an MRI on me, and they found several lesions on my brain. They finally determined that I do actually have MS. And so I reached out to Dr. Berry again on Instagram and asked him how I could, help me with that. And he told me just keep doing my keto and just get my carbs down as low as possible and just stay strict. So that's what I've done. And that's going on almost
3 years?
Two years that I've been diagnosed. Yeah.
Yeah. Something like that. You lose track of time.
Yeah. I've just figured up today would be a week 116 since I've been documenting my MS journey.
Yeah.
So how long I've been doing with it. And then I did have one flare up, and that helped me determine that I'm allergic to almonds and peanuts. And by eating those really caused the flare up. And then they changed my meds, give me a higher dose. And I've been real strict about all that, taking them and everything. And that's kept everything under control. But also, how long was it after we started keto? I was a type 2 diabetic, and I was taking metformin. There's those giant horse pills, and they stink. Every time I open the bottle, it was an awful smell. But the doctor called me shortly after we started keto and told me I needed to stop taking the metformin because it actually could be harmful to me because I was no longer a type 2 diabetic just by doing keto and even quasi keto, basically. Because I was still cheating, like she said, when we weren't together, when I was working construction, I'd still go by and get like the drive-through McDonald's or Whataburger or whatever and eat the bread and the French fries and everything. I was only keto when I was at home. But once he told me about that I was no longer type 2 diabetic, I was sold. There's no reason for me not to be keto anymore. I'm keto for life, the way I feel. There's no reason not to be. There's actually something to this. It's like Dr. Berry says, this is the proper human diet.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's amazing how, like, even just listening to both your sort of different stories bring things together is that, you know, and I find more and more as I do these interviews is that it seems to be there's sort of one thing in people's lives that sort of push them to making that change. Like for me, it was my grandson that I couldn't keep up with. And I'm like, okay, well, I have to do something, right? So that's sort of what pushed me towards that. You know, like last week, I talked to Santa from Mrs. Perfectly Imperfect Keto, and her change is when her son started having seizures. They researched about how to help their son, and keto came up, and you know, so that's what pushed them in that direction. And now hearing both of your stories, even though you know you sort of started getting on the same road, but then there's always something that sort of pushes people over the edge and sort of turns on that light bulb, and it's like, hey, this makes so much sense to do as a lifestyle instead of just as, oh, well, we're just going to do this to lose weight for 6 months. It turns into something like, you say, a proper human diet that you can live on for the rest of your life.
Yeah, and that was the thing too, because like when we'd heard about keto before, when we tried it, we were just like who can eat this forever? Like that just didn't seem sustainable. But then that's one of the things that kind of we push is, look, keto is actually absolutely delicious and very sustainable for long term. Because I think a lot of times people who just hear of keto and don't know, they just think, oh, you're just eating a stick of butter and just bacon all the time, and who can just live off of that, and I'm not going to give up my pastas and my pizzas and my burgers. And because even like he was like, oh, a bunless, because I was like, look, well, you just still have burgers, because he was like, I miss a burger, I have to have a bun. I was like, no, you can just have a bunless burger. He's like, it's burger then. He was like so adamant about, no, a burger has to have a bun for the longest time.
So just almost childlike.
So we were doing like all these keto breads for him just so he could have the bun. And then finally one day it just clicked with him. He was like, oh, you know what? I don't really need the bun.
It took me a minute.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're right. I think that the one exactly is the perception of keto is completely skewed because of opponents of keto, I think, that try to say, oh, well, no, these people are just chugging fat all day long and, you know, it's not healthy for you. Whereas if they'd sit down and all they would have to do is look at your live stream from last night with what you guys made for supper. Like, I challenge anybody to say that what you guys made is not like a tasty, you know, good, healthy meal. Like, it's just the way, you know, if people could see that, then I think it would be easier for people to understand that, you know, okay, yes, you are restricting some of the nice things that we grew up eating, but, you know, you can replace it with things that are just even better.
Yeah.
Well, I changed my thinking on it too, because I hear a lot of people say, like, especially newbies coming in, well, I can't have this, I can't have that, I can't have. My thought on it is, I can eat whatever I want to. I'm just choosing not to eat this, this, and this. But look what I do get to eat. And I feel like my palate is better now, and the quality of foods I'm buying is better now too, because I'm not eating. It's a silly analogy to it. I have 3 trash cans in the garage. We used to put out to the street twice a week.
Mm-hmm.
I'm only putting out 1 can once a week now, just because of what I'm eating. I don't have all the box meals anymore.
And all the waste.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or even like his stepdad one time, he's like, I don't eat no keto food. And we're like, oh, so you're saying you don't like to have like steaks with a salad? And he's like, oh, well, yeah, I'll eat a steak. And we're like, that's 100% keto.
Okay, so we've got Daniel and Janet from Two Doctors Homestead. That's your YouTube channel name.
Yes, sir. Yes, it is. Yeah. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, I guess I had first come across your channel, I think probably at Tom Garvey's live stream. I think I'd seen you in there a few times, and then you did a live stream with Tom and Mike. I think you did one time.
Yeah.
So
yes, sir.
So I had heard sort of about your channel and some of the things you've gone through as far as health journeys and all that. So I wanted to get you here to hear your story and bring it to my viewers and, bring it to your viewers. We can, send it out to anybody that hopefully we can help with these different stories. So why don't we just start with sort of some background as, on your end, as far as, what led to the health journeys you're on and, how things are going.
Absolutely. Do you want to jump in on why keto?
Why keto?
Why keto?
Well, I had a heart attack a couple of years ago, and I've been watching my blood sugar since the heart attack because I'm on 18 medications for my heart because I have heart failure, and inevitably a couple of those medications do increase my blood glucose level. They just naturally do it. Diuretics do it, but if I didn't take my diuretics, I wouldn't be able to breathe. So you kind of have to. The benefit has to outweigh the risk of the side effects. So it's been about 2.5 years now, and I've just been monitoring my blood sugar. And what I noticed is it was slowly just going up and up and up. And it got close to the 180s, and that's at a fasting. And that really scared me because both of my parents were diabetic. So I'd seen my doctor probably 7 months before for a physical, and he said, why don't you try keto?
All right.
Yeah, which, they'd already had me on a low sodium, low fat, low cholesterol diet since the heart attack. But I thought, wow, keto, like you guys are going the opposite of what you just put me on before. Yeah. And I held off on it because, it took a lot to go low sodium, low fat. So I thought, wow, I kind of just got the groove of this low sodium thing, but I had to have just a routine test. And I noticed I started checking my blood sugar again, and it was just getting too high. So I'm like, you know what, let's try the keto. And honestly, I thought it was just bacon and eggs for breakfast type of stuff. I mean, it kind of reminded me of what Atkins was back in the day with fat and everything. And a lot of times all you hear through media and stuff is just the fat stuff. So I actually looked at YouTube for it, and I probably spent a week on different YouTube channels looking at stuff. That's how I found Tom. That's how I found you. And I'd seen a couple of the doctors that, have YouTube sites. And I felt like after about a week, I kind of maybe had a handle to be able to start it because it's difficult. And I started with, downloading a thing to count my macros and everything. And I was like, shoot, this is hard. Like, I didn't realize that there was carbs and all this stuff, but it's been 3 months. And honestly, it gets easier. As you learn, I'm amazed at how much you can retain. I'm like, oh my, I know how many carbs are in that already. I'm not going to eat it. Mm-hmm. So it's been, I think within the first month, I went from a fasting blood sugar of around 180s down to the 120s. And that was doing what I thought was keto, which I was still buying like the keto breads, stuff like that. It definitely wasn't what I now think people call clean keto. I didn't realize how many carbs were like in squash and eggplant and stuff. So I think as I got further and further on in the 3 months, I realized that I was probably eating way more carbs than the 20 net carbs a day. But I'm 3 months in now, and I had some blood tests done, found out that I was allergic to wheat and wheat gluten,
Yeah.
which really helped with cutting the carbs, because then I stopped buying the keto breads and stuff like that.
Right.
And that's really when I started to see a difference, because then my blood sugar started dropping into like the 110s fasting. But for the past month now, I guess you'd call it ketovore. I mean, I try to be carnivore as much as I possibly can, because when you cut the bread, you know, there's really not a lot left to what you were used to eating before, because I didn't realize it, but I was eating heavy carbs, you know. So now I try to just focus on the protein. If I want a veggie, I'll give myself a veggie, because I feel like your body knows what you need. So if I really am looking at that broccoli and going, wow, that would be great now, I feel like that's my body telling me, go get some broccoli. You know, I still go heavy, you know, on the protein part of it though. So, I mean, I actually enjoy carnivore more than I enjoy keto.
Yeah.
But I think it's still ketovore, because I do like to put spice on my food. You know, I like to put a little garlic powder and stuff like that. And that's not true carnivore. You know, it's just salt, you know,
Yeah.
but you gotta live. That's the one thing I learned after my heart attack. You gotta live, you know, within your means. You gotta enjoy life. So
Right.
I feel better now than I did before.
Yeah.
You know, my blood sugar has dropped. I went to the doctor and I had my blood test done for the year. And since I had my heart attack, I had stage 3B kidney disease. So my EGFR was in the 40s, sometimes in the high 30s, which is bad, because 60 or above is normal. And for 2.5 years, I was always running it in the 30s and 40s. And my recent blood draw for the first time since my heart attack was in the 60s. I mean, I got kidney function back, and that was from just bringing my blood sugar down. So that to me is probably the best thing that I've gotten out of it. The decrease in blood sugar has given me some kidney function back.
Right.
You know, because you always worry about your kidneys. You know, so I mean, it's helped me.
Yeah, and that's one of the common things you hear against keto, I think, as a diet, is everyone's like, oh, well, you're gonna hurt your kidneys and
right,
bad for your kidneys and all that. But you know, this just shows that it's not the meat that we're eating that's damaging your kidneys. It's the sugar.
It's the sugar, right?
Yeah, it's the sugar. It's the sugar that's taking you out, because for 2.5 years, I mean, I thought, man, I have to stay in the 30s, because if I dip down to stage 4, that's right before dialysis.
Yeah.
And, you know, my dad went through dialysis for 5 years before he passed, and that is not fun at all. So that was something, I think, more than worrying about my heart failure, I was worried about the kidneys. So, and I've done so much research on kidneys. They say go low protein, because the low protein is better for your kidneys. And, you know, I just put it out there as the faith of let's try keto, let's cut the sugar. And it was amazing that I got that much kidney function back.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the whole, what I like to tell people too is that, you know, it doesn't take forever to happen either. You're only 3 months in, and already you're seeing, you know, major improvements and things like that. And I've heard it over and over again, like people's fasting blood sugar will go down, their fasting insulin. You know, a lot of people get their A1C checked regularly, and they see it decline pretty quickly. So, you know, the outer sort of results of keto with weight loss and all that can take time, but it's the healing that I find, you know, really impressive with the change in diet, how quickly it can take hold.
Right. Yeah. And I didn't do it for weight loss, though. You know, I'm 50 pounds heavier than I was pre-heart attack. I was always just pretty thin. You know, I worked out a lot. I was thin. So, but I know that with the severity of my heart failure, you know, I'm not going to be, you know, 125 pounds again. And I'm okay knowing that. I just wanted to get all this health stuff under control. On a side, I did lose 10 pounds in 3 months, which is nice. I'm not really doing it for weight loss because, you know, I mean, for me, I'm like, I was thin my whole life. Just let me be fat now. You know, give me my chance to be fat.
Right.
Sure. And, you know, and that's the best way to look at it too, because if you're just focused on weight, then, you know, that just drives you nuts trying to look at that all the time. Like I know a lot of people see the success stories, but I again, another thing I try and emphasize is that forget about the weight, just focus on how you feel. You know, are you feeling better? You have more energy, you know, I found a lot of nagging sort of pain I had went away pretty quickly as well. So, you know, yeah, I lost a lot of weight when I first started, but it quickly turned from weight loss to overall health pretty quickly.
Yeah, I noticed when I cut the wheat, because I used to have a really bad shortness of breath. When I cut the wheat, I was able to breathe again, which is, it's so nice to be able to feel like you can breathe. And, you know, more speaking onto that, you can be thin your whole life and not be healthy, you know, because I was thin and I worked out and I could do stuff and I still had a massive heart attack at 47 that killed the whole tip of my heart. So it's not, you know, health is not related to what size you fit into. And I think as a society, we look at that and we say, oh, look at that person. They're considered obese. Of course, they're going to have a heart attack. Of course, they're going to be diabetic and whatnot. But I mean, I had high cholesterol for 5 years before my heart attack. It was only 230. You know, I've known people in the 300s, but 230 is still too high for cholesterol. But the doctors weren't that concerned about it because they looked at me and they're like, oh, you look healthy, you know? So it's not about the scale. It's about, like you said, how do you feel? You know, you could be 20 pounds over what your ideal BMI is, but if you see the result of keto, you have good kidney function, you have more energy, you have less joint pain because my joint pain has gone away. That's really what matters. Your health is what matters, not, you know, how you look and how much weight you're carrying. Yeah.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree 100%. And I just sit here thinking about, because it can go the other way too. Like when I first started, within the first year, when I was still weighing using a scale, the last number I saw was just under 200 pounds, which I was like, okay, well, this is great. But at that moment, I was like, well, yeah, but I don't really feel great.
Right.
Like I don't, it sort of suddenly dawned on me that, okay, well, this is great. I haven't been under 200 pounds since I was 18, but is this really what I'm supposed to be, how I'm supposed to be, you know? And it turned out I wasn't. You know, typically I'm probably between 210, 220, normally, just living the way I do now. And that's, you know, ultimately your body's going to dictate where you feel best, I think, as long as you're putting the right fuel in.
Right.
So.
Yeah. You got a little keto.
Yeah, the keto's been good for me too. I came
along the journey.
I came along the journey. You know, if we're going to do it, we're going to do it together. But a couple years ago, my cousin passed of liver failure, more alcohol induced than anything. But he was a couple years older. It was a couple years ago. So it was about my age that he passed of liver failure. And my doctor hasn't been super happy about my liver last couple years. So last time I went to the doctor, he's like, hey, keto's good. You know, tell him like, hey, I'm going on keto here. And I have lost some weight. So certainly that makes him happier. And it certainly doesn't hurt. You know, one thing with the liver, losing the weight will help, right? You know, if you want to try to drop 10% of your body weight or something like that, just to help kind of clear things up. So I think it helps me as well. And I don't miss it so much. I've never been a big sugar person. I don't quite have the sweet tooth. So just cutting out a lot of the sugars, all the sugars and whatnot. She's the sweet tooth of the family. Hasn't really bothered me too much. Like I don't mind. This morning I made breakfast and we had chorizo that we had made from the pigs we raised ourselves, and then threw some eggs in there from our chickens and a couple other things. And that was just breakfast. And that's pretty close to keto, I think. Just basically eggs and sausage and cheese and some spices. So Like to me, I could eat like that all the time. That wasn't a hard sell. Like, okay, more
Yeah.
meat and cheese and stuff like that. Great. We can do that. I mean, I like bread, you know, I don't miss the bread, but yeah, I mean, it wasn't too big of a sell to switch to keto. I said, and certainly for my own health, you know, that it doesn't hurt, drop a little bit of weight. And I have, last time I weighed in, I was at 219, and I can't remember the last time I was under 220. Like I honestly couldn't tell you, you know, was I 20 years old? I'm 45 now. I don't know. Last time I was under 219. I don't weigh myself every day, but I know on my belt, I've gone from, there was a point where I was on the final last loop before the end, and now I'm on the last loop before I'm out of loops. So they're like, you know, my belt's telling me a story. I'm like, all right, that's pretty good.
Right.
I like the belt, so I'm not sure what I'm going to do now going forward. I'm out of loops on the inside of it instead of out of loops on the outside of it. So I mean, it's certainly in that sense, and it does, I think, feel healthier. You know, sometimes I'll do a little cheat, and you can feel it. Like, yeah, that didn't make me feel good. Like I ate that, and now I don't feel good. So maybe I don't do that anymore. You know, I think you do get more in touch with your body and how the food's affecting you, especially when you don't. You know, I've always kind of made fun of people that were like, "Hey, I'm gluten free." It's like, you're not allergic
That
to
was
gluten.
me. I was always like, I'm dairy free, I'm gluten free.
Right, right.
I did every trend there was. I did it all.
I mean, celiac disease is very rare, and that's the gluten allergy. So I feel like there was a certain payback irony in that, because I was like, no, you're not allergic to gluten. Sorry. It's a lot rarer than you think.
It's more of a sensitivity.
It's a sensitivity.
Because the blood test I had showed sensitivity to gluten.
Right. Yeah, but cutting it out, I feel better. So now I'm kind of like looking back on myself, like, hey, maybe I shouldn't have made fun of people for saying they were allergic to gluten. God doesn't like
ugly pig.
Right, because it's like, no, actually, I do feel better, honestly. And you know, we went out. It is harder on keto to go out to eat. Like, there's some places we can go. We went out to eat last night, a place called 54th Street Grill, and you can do like a whole keto meal there. You know, it's kind of they'll do the steaks, like steak is keto. You can pick your vegetables as keto, you know, get the hot wings for the appetizer. So like you can go keto there, but there's a lot of places we can't go out to eat.
I think it's harder to go carnivore, because I've been trying to do carnivore when you go out to eat. Because a lot of people are just like, you want what? Like, you know, how much meat do you possibly want? Right. I mean, I realized just from going from keto to just trying to be carnivore as much as possible, so I guess technically ketovore, like I had a really bad sweet tooth. Even on keto, I still craved at some degree sweets. Not at all when I slid more towards the carnivore. And I have a sweet tooth. I feel like the less carbs I consume, the less I want carbs. You know, the closer I get to zero, my body, it's like it doesn't even exist anymore. And we raise our own animals. So if I open the window, you'd see we got a big old chicken coop back there. So we get more eggs every day than we know what to do with, honestly. We'll give them away and we'll feed them back to the chickens and feed them to the dogs. And then we raise pigs. We don't have any pigs right now, but we're going to pick up some pigs. So we really don't have a shortage of meat. Like when you're raising your own chickens, you're raising your own pigs, eggs, pork, that stuff, it actually gets pretty cheap if you have the land and you're willing to put in the time. Like we pay about $1 a pound for pork, and that's the bacon, that's pork ribs, any of it, because we raise it ourselves, and that's certainly a lot of work, and we process the animals ourselves. Otherwise, that cost would go way up just paying to send it to the butcher. So we really don't have a shortage of meat. So it's like, okay, we'll go keto. We're just going to eat more of all that meat. Like maybe we'll get some freezer space someday if we eat enough of that meat, you know, and same thing with the eggs and even eating the chicken sometimes. So we certainly have the food available. We don't have a cow or goats where we could get our own dairy, but kind of going in that direction. It was an easy sell. Like, okay, yeah, we'll just eat more of the meat and less bread. It's an easy sell when you start feeling better.
Yeah, and you start feeling better.
Yeah, when you realize that, you know, you really don't want that pain in your knees, and you eat something and you get that like pain in your knee that you're like, wow, you know, I'm just like, I'm not having that anymore. Like, you know, at some point you're like, is the cheat worth it? And it's not. For me, it's just not worth it, because you physically don't feel good. His friends like took us out for Korean barbecue, and I'm like, man, I don't know if that's keto.
Yeah.
But they were on keto before, and they're like, oh no, it's great, it's keto. It's the meats on the grill. I'm like, that's like caramelizing on the grill, like your sugar on it. It's not
it's
like
gotta
it's
be,
a regular barbecue.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
felt so sick the entire next day.
Yeah.
I've pretty much laid in bed because
Right.
I felt horrible, and it reminded me of how I felt before I went on keto.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Not worth it.
Yeah, that's the one thing, like it's, you're already experiencing it after you've done it long enough, and you realize just how good you can feel. Eliminated that. I eliminated all gluten from my diet for 5 years before I started keto because it was really bothering me. I was never diagnosed with celiac, but I just couldn't tolerate it, so I just got rid of it. And I felt better, but I gained a lot of weight because I was
Right.
eating a lot more carbs in like potatoes and rice and everything like that. So, but what I always say is that until you make a change and you start feeling really healthy and really good, it's not until then that you realize just how bad you can feel,
Yeah.
especially when you have something that, like you say, that you think it's keto or someone says it is, and then you eat it, and then the next day you just feel like you've just been hit by a train, right? So it's
Right.
that just, you're exactly right. And that's why I try not to ever go off plan because I just know how bad I'll feel the next day.
Yeah. And I don't think you realize that until you start eliminating things from your diet. Right. And you can eliminate it, and then you go back in, you're like, whoa, I feel bad, and then you can say, okay, that was it, right? Because I eliminated it and I felt good, and then I ate it and I didn't feel good. You can actually start to understand, how those foods are impacting you.
Yeah, keto's a great elimination diet.
Right. You can actually start seeing like, yeah, no, I ate that and I felt bad, and I didn't eat it and I feel good. Like you can actually start kind of understanding your body a little bit more versus if you're just eating the same kind of stuff all the time, you don't know why you don't feel good.
Well, and that's the thing. Like if you're living on a standard American diet or, just eating like 99% of the people out there, like you say, you just don't know what feeling good really feels like. So
Yeah.
you're exactly right. The more you can eliminate from your diet, and like, I always say there's a big spectrum of healthy eating, right? Some people can thrive on sort of lazy, dirty keto. They can have all the products, they can have everything as long as they're not eating like processed carbohydrates. But then there's some people that have to go strict carnivore to get to that point where they feel their best. So as long as you're doing what works for you, I think that's the best way to look at it.
Yeah, I think I do feel the best carnivore, but I give myself a little JoJo spice on it,
keto,
which is
keto
still
on the carnivore.
It's like dirty carnivore. Is that right?
Right, dirty carnivore. Dirty ketovore.
I think I feel the best that way.
Yeah. So Jason, how long have you been doing keto?
I started January 1st, 2019. So
okay. So about 4 years now. Yeah. Excellent.
It was a sort of realization that I was not going to be around to be able to play with my grandkids, because they were already running me, crazy back then at 2 years old. So that's when I made a change and sort of never looked back. And then, a couple of years later, I started the whole YouTube thing just to try and, give back what I learned. So that's what precipitated these interviews that I've been doing, trying to get these stories out there, because everybody's got some kind of piece to the puzzle for somebody, right? Like I've talked to a lot of people that have been keto or carnivore for 5-6 years, and then you have your stories that are fairly recent. So I like to try and bring as much information as possible because everybody's at a different point in their journey. And the first 3, 6, 9 months is definitely the toughest. to turn it into a lifestyle instead of just a diet. But if you've got the the right thinking behind it, I think it makes it a lot easier.
Absolutely. It's very Tom Hanks, Steven Spielberg of you, collecting the stories.
Yeah.
Collecting everyone's stories.
Sure. Yeah. And like I say, it's I figured, I have a platform, I don't really I couldn't figure out what to do as far as content goes. Obviously I do like Dutch waffle recipes and stuff like that. But to me, being able to, like I say on my about page, I'm just here to help people. That's all I want to do, right? Like this isn't my job. It's just to help as many people as I can, because I know what it did for me. And if we as a community can help people, then that's basically my goal.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to have information out there that's a real perspective, not just, when I went to cardiac rehab after my heart attack, I had to take nutrition classes, and those nutrition classes were the same old standard American diet that got me the heart attack in the first place, So I'm like, is she really teaching me at the bottom of the food pyramid that we all know that is just completely saturated with carbohydrates, but that's still what they're teaching in cardiac rehab. And I had my heart attack in 2020.
Yeah.
That my inability to do the things that I used to, which is basically like normal people stuff. I can't sweep a floor. I can't even stand and wash the dishes for a long time because my heart is so damaged that my blood pressure drops. And my normal blood pressure is around like 80s over 50s. And that's like normal after my heart attack. But my blood pressure will tank if I'm standing for 20 minutes to do, the dishes, and it'll go down to, 60s over 30s. And that's when you can start getting, coronary artery spasms, which I did have once that landed me in the hospital and gave me another heart attack. So, when you can't move, and I think mobility wise, I would consider myself pretty immobile, for the sake of just being able to keep living, and you put weight on, because of your inability to move, and then you start doing, a regular standard American diet, like they tell you, all those carbs, you're not going to burn those carbs. You're not ever going to walk enough to get your carbohydrates used as fuel. So you don't need a standard American diet of all these carbs, because you're not a triathlete. You're a person sitting on the couch.
Right.
And, if you can get your body, I just think of it as, my body doesn't store, protein in my thighs. My body stores fat in my thighs because I don't need it. My body runs, I don't need all that sugar. My body runs on, all that reserved energy that I have that's sitting there. And you only use that energy when you reach ketosis. So it really kind of gets me that we've based this whole pyramid. I mean, from a statistical standpoint for us, since we're PhDs, I look at the research that led to the standard American diet. And that man threw out a ton of outliers. He handpicked and cherry picked the countries that he went to. That wouldn't even have passed for our dissertations to get our PhD, let alone to start the whole, basically revolution of nutrition that has gone on for so long. It was just one guy who clearly didn't do research well, and what an impact it made, because that's what the American government decided that they wanted to use as a standard for health, which I'm sure it had a lot to do with who pays who for, what stuff.
Yeah, it fit their narrative.
It fit the narrative, but it's done a lot of damage. It's done a lot of damage on some really bad research, honestly.
Right. And that's one thing I like about keto is, I'm sure there's books on keto you can get, but you don't have to buy keto. Right. You're not selling keto. We're not selling keto. Right. You don't have to buy the 3 shakes a day, and you have the meals shipped to your house, and that's going to cost you $300 a month. And you gotta pay for these keto videos, and you gotta do these keto exercises. Not selling keto, right? It's you can do it. You can learn everything you need to know for free, and just start doing it if you feel like it's something you want to try. So that is one thing I like about keto is no one is selling you keto. We're not doing it. We're not doing a
Right.
keto commercial to get our $50 kickback or something
Right.
like that. We're
Mhm.
You
just
just
telling
feel
you
good
about our
you know?
experiences. Yeah.
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 Yeah.